Hello, and welcome to La Mesa, a City of San Antonio series where San Antonians discuss timely topics in a roundtable setting. My name is Rick Gipprich Jr., and I am the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence Liaison at San Antonio Metro Health. In honor of National Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, which is recognized every October by local communities across the country, we'll be talking today about the city's efforts in responding and intervening when an incident of domestic violence occurs. We'd also like to inform you that today's topic will touch on sensitive issues, and we encourage you to seek support should you need it. In the spring of 2019, our community identified an increase in domestic violence-related murders. Council members at the time, Shirley Gonzalez and Manny Pelayas, asked the Department of Human Services and Metro Health for a structured assessment of domestic violence-related services in our city. The evaluation included available services and systems of data collection and analysis and community responses to family violence, including by law enforcement, social services, courts, and educators across our city. The assessment also pinpointed gaps in services and potential system improvements in incident reporting and follow-up. And as a result, the City of San Antonio embarked on a multi-year process to enhance its programs and services and improve the collaboration across the system of support within our community. Now, here to help me answer some questions and look a little bit more into this issue and the efforts that the city has made is my esteemed panel of guests, all of whom are deeply committed to raising awareness about domestic violence in our city. And I want to thank each and every one of them for being here to engage in this important conversation about the future of domestic violence in San Antonio. I want to start with Audrey Jackson, who is Head Start Administrator with the Department of Human Services for the City of San Antonio. Welcome, Audrey.
Thank you. Thank you for including me.
Absolutely. Next, we have Bianca Mendoza, who is a Crisis Advocate Program Supervisor with San Antonio Metro Health District. Welcome, Bianca.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Erica Holler-Stevenson, who is a Violence Prevention Administrator with the San Antonio Metro Health District here with the City of San Antonio.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
And we have Deputy Chief Jesse Salame, who is Chief of Staff with San Antonio Police Department.
Welcome, Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. My first question I want to pose is to Bianca. Can you tell us a little bit about what you hear from people when they first seek help when an incident of domestic violence occurs in San Antonio and they reach out?
I think something that we hear often is this situation real? Did this really happen? Is the lethality, when we explain the assessments that we do with them, the risk factors? To them, they don't really identify sometimes with being in a situation. And sometimes it's more of like, I've been in this world for so long. What comes next? What am I supposed to do now if I leave the situation? Is it going to get worse? Am I going to have different barriers to overcome? And even navigating the criminal justice system, that's scary for a lot of individuals. So it's just having that conversation where, yes, you are in the situation and there is help for you.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of the advocate and how important that is to a survivor's kind of navigating the system?
So once the advocates receive a report, they're reaching out within 24 hours to those clients. And what they're doing is their safety planning, which is extremely important when it comes to maintaining safety within their own, within a client's family or whatever space that she's in. And the client's the only person that really knows what safety looks like. We can give them ideas, tailor a safety plan, but at the end of the day, the client is going to be the one that knows how to stay safe. So we're just navigating through the process of step one. If you are planning on staying in the relationship, how we can help them once they're ready to leave, or even during that time that they stay with them, having that constant conversation with them. There's also safety tools that we can give. We have door stoppers. We have a lot of tangible goods that can help them remain safe in their homes. And they're having that conversation with them immediately. And they're also doing follow-ups, assisting with protective order applications, or helping them just find the resources that are not readily available and that some people may not know exist.
A lot of times that advocate is that short-term response and that immediate need for help. What kind of things do you provide long-term?
So we have a case management team that once the advocate does the crisis work, sometimes it can be 24 to 48 hours. They can have that client a little bit longer. They transfer them over to the case management team, which can also work crisis management, but they're also doing the long-term, helping with applications for employment, assisting with job readiness, helping them find clothing for a job interview, just getting them set so they're independent and they know that, and they're empowered to move forward, if they are choosing to exit that relationship.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to pose this next question to Erica and Audrey. The City of San Antonio in 2019 conducted a community assessment. Can you tell us what it revealed about domestic violence in San Antonio in our communities?
I'll start, and then maybe Audrey can add to that. We saw that there was a substantial increase in murders among intimate partners, people in some kind of a relationship in the present or in the past. It was pretty notable from 2015 to 2019, an increase from 19 murders regionally up to 37 at its peak for the time period and really ever in the history of the community. We found a really fragmented system of services. Individual services exist, but the pieces don't touch each other. Mm-hmm. And people have a hard time getting from one of those services to the next. We also heard from people that they felt that crisis response teams and law enforcement agencies weren't available enough hours of the day, and that crisis advocates like the program that Bianca leads were not as accessible as they wanted them to be either. There also was, in a more kind of evaluation approach to it, some finding that the lack of a reliable tool for law enforcement officers to assess the potential for somebody to be killed or severely harmed was a big factor in identifying people who might have an issue that we need to detect early and be able to steer them to another course.
Was there something very specific that was happening in our community that prompted the community assessment?
My understanding from what you stated at the beginning of the podcast is that there was an understanding of homicides increasing and just more awareness around domestic violence occurring. This was all before the pandemic began, right? So this is 2019, back in our old normal, before people were confined at home. And just in everyday life to have a really increased prevalence of domestic violence and knowing more people that are experiencing that and seeing more homicides occurring was enough of a driver for City Council to recommend that we look into it deeper.
Great. What did it reveal about domestic violence for your department?
The Department of Human Services. So we know through research that communities that lack economic opportunities have higher rates of incidents of violence. And the services that we provide at the Department of Human Services is sort of that preventative intervention point where we do provide services such as childcare, family assistance, intervention, family empowerment center to help families access those resources. Access to housing as well is a large point of service that our families need. So we are definitely right in the middle of helping the community in these areas.
Great. Does anybody want to add anything to that? Is there any?
No, I mean, I think generally speaking, there had been a decline in intimate partner homicides, and it started to creep up again in 2015. And in 2018, San Antonio, Bexar County led the state in domestic violence, intimate partner violence, homicides. So that was really the big impetus for what transpired after this. Nobody could have predicted COVID and some of the ups and downs we've had since then, but talking about how we got to this point and laying the groundwork for what we have now with the CCDV and a lot of the other improvements we made. So I think it's just something that we all saw coming, and the response has been really good in terms of the collaboration and the partnerships that didn't exist before.
And the CCDV that you're talking about is the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence, right?
Correct.
Yep. Yeah. So I have a question for you about that as well. So when you say that we were leading the state, does that mean that out of all the major cities, or looking at all of the metro service areas, San Antonio was number one?
San Antonio, specifically Bexar County Incorporated, was far and away, had the distinction of having the most intimate partner violence. So, but really men killing women, homicides, and that was really an eye-opener for a lot of people. And it really changed the way we looked at the issue, the way we talked about the issue, and how we're responding to it.
Well, and you've kind of already touched on this, but this kind of leads me into another question about how the city of San Antonio responded to the results of that report. And so I want to kind of give both of you,
Sure.
Jesse, Erica, an opportunity to respond.
I might explain the CCDV that you mentioned
Sure.
for just a moment, because it was a method to try to bring all of us together. I think, as Jesse pointed out, we knew domestic violence was there. It was considered to be a normal part of life and a normal part of any community, especially an urban area. When we saw Bexar County become #1 in the state, far and away, something's wrong, right? And that means we have to do something about that. So with this assessment that was conducted in 2019, among several recommendations that I think we'll highlight together, one of them was to really bring together different sectors of the community, different disciplines, government, non-government, healthcare, judiciary, law enforcement, all the usual people, but then the not usual people too. Right? So higher education institutions, anybody who has a hand in this kind of thing. So under a local administrative judge, a court order was issued to form the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence that same year. And it is designed to bring a representative from each of these sectors together into one group, to work among each other, to break down the walls between, to make the parts of the system work together better, to find the gaps and find solutions together. And this is chaired by a judge with Bexar County and currently the deputy city manager for the city of San Antonio.
Great.
And I like to add too about the importance of this this issue, or how we're looking at it. And I don't want to, I'll get into it later, but I know we're looking at it as a public health issue, domestic violence. And I think that's really important with how we frame it, because this was always looked at as being a law enforcement issue. And we are really good at response. We're not so well equipped to do prevention. And so that's the bigger discussion. And so from a law enforcement perspective, we got the response part down, but it's already happened. And how do we respond to that when it happens? And more importantly, how do we prevent that from happening? And so when we took the surveys, when we had the town halls, there was a little bit of pushback, a little bit of maybe people, hey, where you guys been? And I think what's important to really highlight is that there was already a lot of very passionate people working really, really hard and doing what they could in their own way to try to address this issue. What is always lacking when you have a big, complicated issue and you've got different people across different sectors is that you had individuals that were working alone. And so there wasn't the collaboration, there wasn't a lot of information sharing. Mm-hmm. And for an issue as complex as domestic violence, those are the things that you need so that we can go across sectors, across disciplines, across organizations to really try to get to the root cause of what's causing causing the issue. And so when we talk about the plan, whether it's the domestic violence plan that preceded the Collaborative Commission on Domestic Violence, I think it's just really laying the foundation and setting some very specific goals for each organization, each department, SAPD, and others to try to fill in some of those gaps that had been existed for a long time.
That strategic plan that Jesse's referring to was created in follow-up to the assessment the same year, and it was designed as a city strategic plan to direct SAPD, Human Services, Metro Health in how we would work across the city government on domestic violence. And then the CCDV adopted pieces of that for their own. It became their strategic plan as well, that was then ultimately amplified to include the county government and nonprofit organizations so that we could all be working in the same direction at the same time.
Audrey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You talked a lot about prevention and what DHS is doing to help that. Jesse talked about response, right? So we know that intervention, prevention have to coexist in order for us to make some sort of change. Right. They have to exist concurrently. What kind of things specifically is DHS doing in terms of prevention?
Yes, so we are currently funding 6 organizations with $1.3 million in prevention and intervention. Organizations such as Project Empower, Partners Peace Healing Circles, Battered Women's Children's Shelter, and the like. And I can speak on the part from the Head Start program and how we've been accessing, but we've seen a huge increase in resources to our program. And it's interesting to be in the position of both working for the Department of Human Services, seeing the funding and the resources that we've been able to give other organizations, but then at the same time working in the Head Start program, where we are a program that's accessing these services as well through Metro Health. And it's really the support that we've received over the last few years due to this initiative has been notable for us and our staff and our families.
So that kind of answers the question, right, of what the city of San Antonio is doing with the results of this report. So would we say that a lot of this programming came as a result of the report, or was it just enhanced because these were things we were already doing, but now with the report coming out, we are adding and enhancing and kind of beefing up our programs to kind of address those findings?
Would you say it's a mix, probably?
I think it's a little bit of
Yeah,
both. Yeah, it's a lot of both. Yeah.
There are a lot of pieces in place that Jesse was directly involved in some of this at the time. The advocates that are currently in Metro Health used to be at SAPD, and they were framed as victim advocates, and it was in the institution of law enforcement, which can sometimes for people color the experience a little bit. And so part of the movement there was to move advocates into a health or community serving organization that takes that health approach or social service approach rather than a law enforcement angle, so that people felt that there was some kind of separation, at least for people who were uncomfortable with that. And then we also tripled the size of the program through the additional funding from the city, added the long-term case management, which is the difference maker.
Right.
You can be there for every 911 call. You can connect people to resources, but it takes an average of 7 or more times for someone to be able to permanently leave an abusive relationship,
Right.
which means we have to be there every time that happens. And then when they're ready, we have to have the other things they need, not just for today, but for many months to come.
So I'm gonna direct this towards you, because I feel like that advocacy piece is really important, and I've done advocacy work for many years, and I feel like the importance of an advocate a lot of times in a survivor's life, or someone who is experiencing either family violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, is us as advocates have a tendency to be sometimes the only person in that survivor's life at that moment who says, I believe you, it is not your fault, you did nothing wrong to deserve what happened to you. And that can make a huge difference in how someone eventually copes and heals and integrates their victimization into their life, right? And moving forward. So I want to ask you, what can people expect in terms of domestic violence assistance when they either call 911 or they contact the police department?
Once we receive a DEL assessment, so the danger assessment, so there's a high lethality and an at-risk lethality. So that's how we're reaching out to our clients, and we're reaching out a lot faster. So we're making that contact sometimes the same day that the incident happened. And we're taking a non-judgmental approach. Like you said, sometimes we're the only lifeline for them. And the non-judgmental approach comes from families tend to say, well, what did you do? Right. Or, you hear like, you stayed so long. Why did you stay so long? Right. So they start blaming the victim, which makes it even harder for them to leave. And they're like, well, maybe I did do something wrong to stay here, right? So us coming in, we're that outside voice where I do believe you. I understand this is difficult. I know that you've been through this 7, 8, 9 times. We have all these reports or whatever calls that have come in on regarding this case, but we're here to help you. We're here to make that change, that navigation a little bit easier. Because when you hear about resources, not everyone's going to know, let me Google battered women's shelter or whatever is going to help them out. They don't know that. Even doing it with the protective order, that's a barrier for some people. So it's coming and saying, we're here to support you. We're here to guide you. And sometimes it can take those 6, 7 months coming from case management. We know that. And it could be from food stamp assistance to just getting help with the kids and understanding, I have these barriers because I couldn't leave, and now I'm facing this 7, 8 months later. I'm also part of our empowerment group, and I had a client who's married 25 years, and she had never, ever had her own bank account. And we had one of our local banks sit in with us, and they helped her open the account that day. And to her, that was the most amazing piece of anything, because she was like, how could I have never experienced having a debit card, having my own money, somebody gassing up the car, and I would have to ask permission to take my own car, and it was under her name. And so we're that person to say, you know what, I know you've been through this for a long time, and you stayed for 25 years, because that's all you knew. The resources weren't there, the help wasn't there. So it's very important for us to come in at that time and say, I support you, and there's help there. Because not a lot of people hear that.
Yeah, I think that foundation is really important, because and I would love for the community to know and understand that sometimes, we send survivors back into the world into a world that is going to judge them, that is
Yes.
going to ask questions about,
Mhm.
like you said, why did they not leave? Why did you put yourself in this situation? It's your fault. You should have known better. I taught you better, all of
Mhm.
those things. But laying that advocate or that foundation of advocacy, understanding that we are with you, we are by you, we will help
Yes.
you, again, plays a huge role in how they how this affects their lives.
Definitely. And we've had clients that come back through like 1 week later because either they're somewhere they don't, they come in pockets, right? I had a client who lived at the Liaison courts. And so she goes to that picnic, like the same thing. She didn't have a car. So that was the easiest place for her to go get like eggs and stuff, right?
Right.
And somebody ended up telling me, I saw her here. So he found her and she was re-victimized. And she took that really hard because she was taking the steps to be safe, but she didn't have a way to get to HB and, didn't have the help. And you see them kind of, when we call them back and say, hey, I know this happened, or do you want to talk? They don't always want to talk to us because they have been shamed for so long. So us even telling them, if anything else happens, please reach out to me the minute it does. It gives them a sense of like, okay, I know that I have someone
Right.
in my corner,
Yeah.
that I don't have to call my mom who has judged me. I don't have to call my best friend, and the question is like, what did you do? Or why did you put yourself
Right.
at that corner store? So it really is being that second person or that one person, at times that one person in their lives.
So we heard from an advocate perspective. Do you want to add anything about what folks, in terms of assistance, folks who are experiencing domestic violence, they can expect from SAPD?
Sure. And I think it's important, they both touched on it, talking about 7 times on average to leave. The judgment that comes with all the questions as to why didn't you do this? Why didn't
Right.
you do that? And I think that as police officers, we are prone and susceptible to having that same level of judgment with the people that we encounter. The 7 times that we get called out, it might be the same officer that works that area. It'd be like, you didn't leave before, you're not going to leave this time.
Yeah.
Why are you wasting my time? That is very detrimental to someone that's going to reach out to us. So before they can even get to the case managers or the advocates, they've got to get to that officer first. And so one of our core values is compassion. And that is often the hardest thing to enforce. It's just human nature.
Right.
We have so much vicarious trauma that we see day in and day out that we've got to constantly remind our officers. One of the things that we did to reinforce that is we got trauma informed certified through the Ecumenical Center. We are one of the few major city police departments. We are definitely the largest police department that received that certification. And all that is recognizing the impact that trauma has in people's lives and not re-victimizing them, creating that safe and supportive environment so that they feel comfortable to call you and make that report. And I think that goes a long way in reducing re-victimization. I think that improves communication and that builds trust. And so those are all important factors. And that was one of the things that we heard time and time again, whether that was through the surveys or that was at the town hall, is that they just didn't feel like that the response that they got from the officer was acceptable. That's not really what happens all the time, but if it happens once, it really makes it difficult because that's what everybody hears. We've got 2,700 sworn officers. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but we constantly reinforce that type of training, that type of compassion, and that level of understanding so that we can trying to get to the root causes and making that a little bit easier for them to transition from that report to maybe taking advantage of those resources and getting out of that situation.
I can't pass up an opportunity here, knowing a little bit about what everybody at the table does. Could you tell us more about the Dale? And then you have a story to share with us from one of your clients.
Yes.
So again, we talk about improvements, and we had a threat assessment that was probably about 20, 25 years old. It was something that was probably put together from different types of assessments over the years. It wasn't evidence-based. The scoring was a little bit, nobody knew how it was developed.
Can you explain threat assessment?
So the threat assessment is just measure at its most basic level. And again, I'll leave it to the advocate, but it's just addressing the potential lethality of a situation.
Okay.
And so when we're talking about threat assessments, we're really looking at something that is, a high risk of somebody being killed by their partner. There's no other way to put it, right? And so the DALE was developed by researchers and practitioners. That stands for Danger Assessment Law Enforcement. And that is an evidence-based model. It is made specifically for police officers, again, as first responders, we're going to get there, and it allows us to focus on those most potentially violent cases and get those folks funneled to the right person in the case management sector, the advocate section, and then allow them to do their thing and get all the resources that they have. Again, very happy to say that is something done by the Geiger Center, which, for domestic violence, you can't get anybody that's got more credibility and people that aren't more dedicated to this issue. But that is something that we're very, very proud of. Again, the largest police department to have implemented it. I think we're fully on board now, and they're gonna be studying that. And so I think the data will show, hopefully, that we've been able to reduce some of these things, because we can't typically measure what we prevent. Yeah. But I trust that the researchers at Johns Hopkins and ASU will be able to tell us that. So.
And then Bianca sees the other side of it. Tell us what a DAIL means to you, and then the story that your client shared with you.
So when the DAIL comes in for us, every substation, has their team responding within 24 hours. If it's a high risk, sometimes it's that day. Sometimes it just happened because it comes in, there's an advocate available, they're reaching out, they're safety planning with the client. Do you need to get out? Where we can get you out? What are the next steps? When it's an at-risk, they're still reaching out, sometimes the same day, because we have advocates that are, they're very passionate about the job that they do. And what we do is it's like a triage. Mm-hmm. They know that they're making sure that everything is done before they're sent to case management, but we're giving them every single resource that they need at this time. And sometimes, of course, at the beginning, it's hard. Yeah. You're not going to give them every single thing. Like some stuff is for long-term case management. Mm-hmm. And some stuff is, we have to take care of right this second, like the protective order or just safety measures. I had a client this summer. She experienced domestic violence in 2 different states. When she came to Texas, she told me, I did not realize the protective order was so hard to obtain. Right? Mm-hmm. She was an at-risk client, I believe, in March, and then she came through as a high several times within 30 days. She could not fill out the protective order at all. I told her, come to the office, we'll sit together, we'll work on it. We typed it out together. When she was there, she said, this is the first time I've ever felt like a human being. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about it, right? Because when you hear that, you're like, oh, I like to hear that they feel empowered. And she used that word empowered. She said, when the officer came out, he asked me these questions. And it was a DAIL assessment. And she said, I felt like a human, that they weren't just saying, okay, what happened? Let's go. And her experience also comes, like I said, different states. Yeah. She was very happy with the way they treated her. And so then another offense came in, I believe the next day, and I told her, you need to report it. We're working on the protective order, you need to report it. And I said, remember, they're still going to ask you the same questions. She was like, I'm fine with answering them. It's the same officer that works my area. He knows me. So I'm prepared for them. And I'm glad that he told me you're a high risk. Because no one ever said you're at a high risk for lethality. And she asked, what does that mean? Well, that he can, potentially kill you or hurt you. Yeah. And when someone told her that, she was like, wow, before it's just next report. So that assessment in itself for her was a great tool. And she's very happy about it, that we're using that here in San Antonio. And she did obtain her protective order, just to let you know.
Well, we're gonna talk about messages to the community at the end, okay. But I want to ask Jesse really quickly. Hearing that story, why, and us knowing the importance of a DAIL and knowing the importance of an assessment and assessing someone's risk, right? Why does the community need this, and what do you want to tell the community about why this is important for them?
You're talking about the DAIL specifically?
Yes, yeah. And I say that because I think a lot of folks have some hesitation with calling law enforcement because they don't feel like they're going to get treated fairly. They're afraid of retaliation. They're not going to be believed. There's so many reasons why. But why is something like this important for folks to understand, and why that it's available to them?
Sure. I think it's important that people recognize the commitment that's been made. The commitment to even a cultural change as to how we, not just how the department responds to, but how the city as a whole is looking at this issue. I think when we historically have talked about domestic violence, mm-hmm. that has been something that we would just not share outside of the family. The children that go to school maybe would not say something, or the teachers or the counselor would be like, well, it's none of our business. Let us know if you need something. I know you didn't sleep last night. So I think it just frames that in a way that is really honest and tells people, and in a way that you said, I think really hit on the head, really telling somebody you're at you're at risk. You're going to die if you don't help us do these 3 actions. Not that judgmental way, but I'm saying it's just having somebody like really hearing that for the first time and not just feeling like we're just going through procedural motions and the case is going to get sent to the district attorney's office and you might not hear something for a year or 2 because there's just a backlog of cases, or we're just, we'll take a report and then we'll come back tomorrow and take a report. I think hearing that there's some real research behind it, there's some real resource allocation behind it, and there's actually, more important, there's real people that are committed to actually making a difference and trying to help you.
So I want to direct this next question to everyone at the table, but I want to start with Audrey. We kind of already shared some examples of how we've enhanced our services since 2019, but in hearing the conversation about intervention and the role that law enforcement plays in the Dale and the formation of CCDV, how would you say all of that integrates into the work that DHS does?
Sure. I think I'd like to take the opportunity to speak about how Head Start has integrated with that. From our perspective, knowing that we're working with both SAPD, Metro Health, and hearing Bianca, I know that when our staff interact with these organizations, that we are all on the same page. I hear the same language being shared, that we are also going through a trauma-informed care approach, and that's something that it's very important to our department and to our division at Head Start. We've engaged in providing Triple P as a result of Metro Health study and their real push for Triple P across our community as a way to prevent violence. So that's something that our team has decided to embrace and to also provide to our families. But I think before, perhaps maybe we felt a little bit alone in having to make judgment calls or decisions and not having the guidance that we necessarily needed to help a family. And now we know it's just a phone call away to reach out to SAPD, reach out to Metro Health. We see the difference in the services to the families. We feel the comfort level. And we know that that support system is there, both in respect to training of our team. We've become more focused, have been able to really solidify our procedures, understand which direction we're going and how we can help families. And I think it makes our staff members feel more at ease that they have the support and that we have a larger team around the city that's supporting us and the families that we serve.
Great. I want to ask you if you might maybe discuss a little bit about what Triple P is for folks that may not know what that is.
Sure. Triple P is Positive Parenting Program. Mm-hmm. It is a international curriculum that's been developed, and there's many different ways that you can enter and decide to present this curricula. However, Metro Health has developed a platform where all the organizations that are providing Triple P are able to coordinate so that we're not having duplicative services in perhaps the same school district and offering the same levels of sessions. Our team members are providing large group sessions with families, and then if families are interested, we continue on with one-on-one services as well, and we're finding great success with that. It's just nice to know that we are all sort of speaking the same language as far as this as an intervention strategy, and we see that we are gaining traction with it, and families recognize the name of Triple P and are becoming to have more confidence with it as well.
Thank you. Erica, do you want to add anything about Triple P? It falls under the violence prevention section under Metro Health.
Yeah, as Audrey mentioned, we're kind of like the hub for Triple P in Bexar County. So we have our own small team of 3 people who teach classes all day at various levels. And not only is the curriculum international, it's evidence-based and is proven to prevent child abuse and maltreatment by working with parents to learn how to use more positive practices rather than punitive practices and how to avoid abuse. So this really connects well to Head Start because it is about changing the path early in life. Preventing children from being abused makes them less likely to be abused or be abusive in their future. And it is a healthier upbringing for them. It creates a safer home. And then the same experience is multi-generational, right? This is a way that we can disrupt this lineage that is carried down from generation to generation.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks see our community, especially, they hear numbers, they think we're leading the state. We have, however many survivors that come in and seek help every day. We've parents going through this program and case managers that are working with all of these survivors, and they think, we have a huge domestic violence problem and in our community. And I think it's also important for us to understand too that domestic violence and family violence, sexual violence, all of those ills are not necessarily the issue. They're more of a symptom of a larger problem. Mm-hmm. And when we address that larger problem, we ultimately reduce incidences of family violence, domestic violence, sexual violence. And I feel like that's what each of these programs and the work that everybody is doing is really helping to do. And I think that's by what you said, addressing the root cause of that. So I want to ask if anyone wants to add to that or comment on that a little bit.
No, I mean, I'll just expound on that a little bit. Eric, you all touched on it and said, I think the important part about that is that, a lot of these are learned, ingrained behaviors that are carried on over generations. And so in order to reverse that, in order to stop that, it's going to take a generation or so to realize some of those results, right? And so the stuff that we're doing now with today's pre-K students, mm-hmm. by the time that they're in high school or they're in college and they're able to be parents and partners, that maybe they will have learned not to engage in that kind of behavior. So I kind of cringe sometimes when we have to look at the numbers and then there's a response, sometimes from the media, sometimes from our partners. It says, well, I mean, gosh, you've done all these things for domestic violence. You've dedicated all these resources. You've allocated all these funds. Like, why isn't it working? These are generational problems. And so I think that's my big message for everybody. I know everybody at this table gets it, but even for the folks out there that are watching, is that this is not something that we're going to be able to solve or fix overnight. This is going to take a generation. It's something that's long overdue, and I think that we're really laying the foundation right now to reverse course on this as these younger children get older and into adulthood.
I think that kind of connects very much with what I think about this issue too, mm-hmm. and what I would share with people is that if you're changing behavior and your experience in life, that's years and years and years of work.
Right.
We can put more police on the streets. We can put more people into service programs, but it's today. That's today, right? Mm-hmm. What disrupts that flow? What stems the flow, right? How do you reduce the flow of the hose? That is by working earlier in life. That is by making societal changes, helping people understand that domestic violence is not a hush-hush. We don't talk about it. That's private business. That none of us accept that. Right. It's not okay for anyone to experience that. It's not okay for anyone to accept it. And that as a community, we're all saying we don't accept it and we make a change in the way we behave.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that has come up quite frequently as well is when the numbers spike or we get a lot of new reports in, or they're higher than they were the year before or the quarter before, that has a tendency to kind of have the community be like, what is happening in our city, right? What is happening in our county? And they think we have a huge problem and we need to address it, and everyone goes into response mode. So I wondered if any of y'all could talk about that, what that does to our community. And let me explain a little bit, because I feel like when numbers rise, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are having mm-hmm. a spike in domestic violence. It could mean that because of the work that each and every one of y'all is doing, we're reaching more folks and mm-hmm. people feel safer to report it. And so, yes, that's going to cause the numbers to go up. And I think that scares our community a little bit when we see rise in numbers. Can y'all talk a little bit about that?
I feel like you probably have the most daily experience with that kind of question.
I do, and I think the way we, again, framing that argument is really important, because it could mean a lot of things, mm-hmm. right? It might be, there might be other things that are going on that we really can't account for. But to me, the most important thing really, and I go back to what I'd like to talk about a little bit more, is looking at this as a public health crisis, right. and understanding what that means, as opposed to just a law enforcement straight up numbers reporting how many reports, how many arrests, how many homicides, looking at this in the way that we've all talked about here at length today, I think really helps us, and that was part of the collaborative commission as well. One of the missions was a collaborative media strategy, because the media will report things, but we have to be able to come back and put the right folks out there, whether that's the prosecution, the judiciary, the law enforcement committee, to be able to speak to those things and to be able to be singing from the same sheet of music so that people understand that we are together on this.
Yeah.
And again, that's the day-to-day stuff. It drives me crazy with the numbers, but it is what it is. I think just making sure that our partnerships are really aligned and that we're committed together to be able to explain that, to talk about all the things that this could be.
I think to give a little clarity on a number and what it can mean and not mean is through SAPD and to Metro Health, our crisis advocate team collectively across the city of San Antonio reaches out to about 1,000 new people per month. That is a horrifying number on the face of it, right? 1,000 people need domestic violence support services. But that means 1,000 people reached out for help. And that number going up doesn't necessarily mean there's more abuse. It may mean more people are comfortable with the police. More people know they can get services. And there's so much underneath that, you can't detect what the cause is.
Right.
And I'm sure same for Head Start, when there's more interest in Head Start, people might think there are more kids who can't afford preschool.
Correct.
When it's ultimately about helping people find the services they need or want and bringing them to them in a more effective way.
Do you want to add anything to that, Audrey?
Yeah, I'm just listening and thinking about how the relationships that we develop with our family members that are in our program, with our own staff members. I think it is a real basis for people feeling comfortable and reaching out for those community services. And I hope that with time, we will turn the corner. But I would imagine that that families having access to these services and feeling comfortable and hearing the language that we're speaking, that it makes sense that we would see that increased number temporarily.
I have one more question for each of you, and I want to start with Bianca. If each of you could share one message with the people in our community, the San Antonio folks, our residents, what would it be?
If you're in a domestic violence situation, I just want to tell people that I know it's hard to make that first call or just identify that you're in that situation, but there's hope and there's a lot of resources, and we have advocates and case managers, officers, people that care, and that you're not alone. Most importantly, that you're not alone, because domestic violence can be isolating. And I think that's what stops people from taking that first step.
Yeah. I would say similar. There are great programs out there that lend support. So please just recommend to everyone in the community to trust that and to engage in those community sources, so that you don't have that feeling of isolation, that you do know that you have a community around you to support you.
Great.
Yeah. She said it best, help and hope. And both of those are here in abundance. There'll be an army of people that are going to be standing right next to you to give you all the resources you need, and to do it in a way that you don't feel judged or you don't feel like you're being re-victimized.
I would say we've heard most from people in our community who experience this that they need to know that there's hope. And not only is there this army of people ready to help you and who will always be there to help you, we need our community to be part of that too. And that's really, I'm calling on the community to pitch into that. You don't have to do the work, you don't have to be a paid worker or a volunteer, but you can be supportive to that family member or friend or neighbor and tell them that you know that there's some help for them.
I want to thank everyone again for joining us for this really important conversation. The message of hope came across loud and clear from each and every one of you, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our community. And with that said, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, we want to help you find resources for support. There is a QR code on your screen that you can scan using your smartphone to go to a city website with a listing of resources. If you are experiencing an emergency, call or text 911. To find resources, call 211 or visit their website. And you can also call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-2929. SAFE, or SAFE, or text by sending the word START to 88788. It was a pleasure to hear your voice. It was a pleasure to hear your contribution, and it is an honor to work with you every day and know that y'all are out there doing the work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of La Mesa, and until next time.